So I think we are good. We can start. So I'll do a quick introduction first. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Nitin Nyati. I'm a TAM in VMware in Mumbai. I also have Siddharth Swami along with me. He's co-hosting this webinar with me, and he's also a TAM based out of Pune. So the topic for today's webinar is VMware vSAN and its capabilities. This is the third webinar of the webinar series that we are doing along with the R&D team. So we got a lot of requests from the TAM customers that they want to have a session delivered on vSAN from the backend R&D team. So hopefully this session will be useful to all of you. I would also want to introduce the presenters for today's webinar. We have Richard and Anmol from the R&D team. Both Richard and Anmol have extensively worked on vSAN. Richard has worked on vSAN since its inception, right from 2014. So they bring a lot of expertise on. And before we start this, I just want to set up some basic ground rules. We are recording this session. So the recording will be sent to the respective TAMs. So you can reach out to your respective TAMs and get the recording. We will also have a Q&A session in the end. We'll try to have a 10 minutes of Q&A in the end where you can unmute yourself and ask the questions directly to the presenters. But before that, during the webinar, if you have any questions, then you can put that in the Q&A window at the bottom. Yeah. So I think now we are good to start. I'll hand over to both Richard and Anmol to take it forward.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on VMware vSAN and its capabilities. So, as Nitin said, my name is Richard and I have Anmol with me. So we are from vSAN R&D team, Storage and Availability Business Unit. So for today, let's go over the agenda, what we are going to talk about. The first thing, we will have an overview on vSAN. Then we'll have a deep dive into vSAN architecture. Let's also look into storage-based policy management with vSAN. Let's look into some of the clustered features and data services, vSAN health, and also the update part. Then let's also look into cluster topologies. Then we'll also briefly touch upon the multiple ways of managing vSAN infrastructure. And then let's wrap up with Q&A. VMware vSAN is one of a kind storage solution that is developed for virtual machines. So vSAN is deeply integrated into VMware hypervisor. So in case if you are using any ESX server, then vSAN by default is present in the ESX hypervisor. So you don't have to do anything extra. You don't have to install an appliance to get vSAN. You just have to enable few checkboxes and vSAN will be up and running. Definitely you need some kind of hardware, but from software perspective, you don't have to do anything extra. So vSAN is built from ground up for the virtual machines. So as you know, I believe most of them have been using ESX for a long time. That always you use ESX to provision virtual machines. So based on our understanding of virtual machines, based on our understanding how customers use virtual machines, we have built the vSAN for the virtual machines. So in vSAN, it is a storage policy based management. So you just have to assign a policy to the VM and everything takes place magically. So in case if you want to create 2 mirrors, you just have to assign some policy to the VM saying, I need 2 copies of data. It works for you. And dynamically at some point of time, you think, hey, 2 copies are too less over there. I need 3 copies. My data is very important. So you just have to assign additional policy and then everything happens seamlessly behind the screens. What vSAN is comprised of? vSAN actually aggregates all the local SSDs, hard disks that you have in your server, aggregates them together, and then presents it as a single data store. So all the servers inside a cluster, remember, you might know data center cluster in the vSphere. So here I'm talking about the cluster. All the nodes which are present inside that cluster can use this data store. Now, there is a question. Can the servers which don't contribute any hard disk, any storage, can they use vSAN? definitely they can use vSAN. The recommended is that you some storage that would actually maintain a good balance or good performance across the cluster. But in case if you have certain servers which cannot contribute any server or any hard disk, then you can still use the data store. Now, vSAN is also designed to use commodity hardware that is available in the market. So here, what I mean to say by commodity hardware is you can buy any SSDs, local disk, put it into the server, and then get the vSAN up and running. But here there is a catch. You cannot just buy any hardware in the market. You just need to make sure that the hardware is present in VMware's hardware compatibility list. The reason why VMware maintains a hardware compatibility list with all the hardware controller, all the information is that they don't want customers to actually buy some inferior hardware and end up in production loss. So there are lots of, when you buy hard disk, you can buy a hard disk for $100, you can buy a hard disk for $1,000. They do offer same capacity, but then the reliability is different. So here that is the case. So highly reliable hardware is present in HCL. Anything that does not make it into HCL, either it is under certification or they did not make the cut to be part of the vSAN cluster. vSAN can scale up and vSAN is designed to scale out also. So vSAN is a battle-tested, production-ready software. There are lots of customers running different applications on top of vSAN. Some run business-critical applications. Some also run virtual desktop, cloud-native apps, containers. You name the application, all the application runs on top of vSAN. Now that vSAN is very mature, people are also running a lot of or thinking of running Kubernetes-based applications on top of vSAN too. And here is a sneak peek. One of the greatest VMware India customer who used vSAN, and they actually ended up in 2.8 million sales of tickets without a glitch. Now you can see this is a Book My Show customer over there. In case if you ended up watching this movie, you got a successful ticket. I think some part of success goes to vSAN. I'm just saying. So now that we have talked on a high level about the vSAN, let's also look what is under the hood of vSAN. So in vSAN, the basic building blocks of vSAN is a disk group. Now, what is a disk group? It's not a disk, it's a disk group. So in disk group, it consists of cache and capacity. Cache generally has a superior disk, which can actually give you a high throughput, low latency, and has a high endurance for writes, while capacity have got large amount of space and then maybe less throughput, low endurance, but a cheaper grade over there. Generally, SSDs or the cache tier is much more expensive in comparison with capacity. And in a disk group, we generally support up to 7 capacity disks. You can only have 1 cache disk, but we do support 1 to 7 capacity disks. And you can at the max have 5 disk groups in a node. So I would use node and server interchangeably in vSAN. Both means the same over there. So in one node, we support 5 disk groups. And another thing I want to emphasize over here is you don't need to have all the disks plugged into the server upfront. As and when you think you need more capacity, you can dynamically hot plug the devices into the server and vSAN can recognize them. And then you can actually add them to the disk groups. You don't have to reboot the server or bring the server down for any other reasons. So vSAN can dynamically do all the stuff on the fly. So let's also look more deeper, okay, under the microscope, what does the disk group contain? So when I talk about disk group, there are 2 types of disk groups. One is all flash disk group and another is hybrid disk groups. And depending on what kind of disk groups you have, the cluster is named as such. So all flash disk group cluster is all flash vSAN, and the cluster which has got hybrid disk groups is a hybrid vSAN. You cannot have one cluster which has both all flash and hybrid disk groups. Now, The all-flash disk groups and hybrid disk groups, it comes with some difference. So in all-flash, as you see over here, so 100% of the cache tier is reserved for writes, while the reads also go and go to the capacity disk. But when you look into the hybrid vSAN, technically the capacity disks are made up of magnetic disks, which are slower. So we do use 70% of the SSD for the read caching. 30% is reserved for writes. But is that only it, or is there something more? So definitely, all flash do provide you additional data services like DDoP, compression, and erasure coding. Because it can support high IOPS, has low latency, the DDoP, compression, and erasure coding can leverage such kind of infrastructure for giving you better data services. In vSAN, we use two-stage write process. So technically, whenever you want to do a write, first the write hits the cache. And then when the writes in the cache become cold, they move back to the capacity disk. Now, moving back to the capacity disk happens asynchronously. But whenever VM wants to write or issues a write to its disk, it definitely goes and hits the cache tier. So let's look into more of an object over here. So in vSAN, we talk the language of objects. Here, everything is an object. VM namespace, VMDK, VM swap, snapshot delta disk, everything. So all the files that used to consume large space on your VMFS data store or NFS data store is an object over here. And the beauty of objects, like I mentioned earlier, is that you can associate policies with it. If you have a 2 TB object or 2 TB VMDK, you can actually assign a RAID 1 with 2 mirrors or RAID 1 with 3 mirror policies, and automatically everything happens transparently over there. And you don't have to do anything. You don't have to create more disk groups, or you don't have to provision a new LUN or raise a ticket for this one. You just have to associate a policy with the VM, and given that you have space, it automatically happens for you. So over here, when you deploy a VM on a vSAN data store, by default, RAID 1 policy is assigned to the VM. RAID 1, one mirror. So technically, when the VM gets deployed on the vSAN data store, it creates two mirrors. And always vSAN is designed to place mirrors on different servers. At any given time, no two mirrors are present on the same server, though you have 5 disk groups. Though you have more capacity, we will never place multiple mirrors which belong to a same VM on the same host. The reason for this is that when the server goes down, it can at the max bring down one mirror. That is the design how vSAN, or that's the way the vSAN is designed. Let me also go into the next part. So like I said in the previous slide, the default VM, what we provision vSAN data store is RAID 1, and it has two mirrors. So let's look how the IOs happen from the RAID 1 mirror, VM's perspective. So here what you see is a 3-node cluster. You have got one disk group each on each of the server. Server 1 has one disk group, server 2 has one disk group, and server 3 has another disk group. So hold on, let me see if there are any comments.
Richard, so it looks like there's a question that the disk group should be only SSD or it can be SAS also.
So it could be, disk groups can have SAS disk and SATA disk. We support both. Okay.
Right, but if you go with hybrid mode of vSAN, then you need at least one SSD in every disk group.
Yes. So cache tier is always like SSD, but the capacity can be hard disk or a SSD over there based on like what kind of infrastructure you want, all flash vSAN or a hybrid vSAN. Now the disk can be SATA interface or can have a SAS interface too. It does not matter. As long as they are local disk, it works out everything.
Guys, for all the attendees, just a quick information. If you have any question, please post it on the Q&A window so that we can track it, and also somebody can answer it while Richard is presenting. Richard. Richard, you can go ahead, please. Thank you.
So let me answer the last question. Can we fake an SSD? We can. So this is for the non-production environment. In case if you don't have any SSDs over there and you want to try out a vSAN, you can always tag a magnetic disk as an SSD and use it for your testing. But strictly, it is only for your testing or experimentation, not for the production. So also, like in case if you have more questions, maybe like if you are not able to answer over here, you can share it with Nitin, and then we should be able to answer them or give you the pointers how to get everything done. So let me proceed over here. So I was talking about how a write propagates from a virtual machine and ends up in the disk group. So let's say like VM over here, what you see, wants to initiate an IO to its disk. It wants to commit an IO. So the IO originates from the VM. It enters into the vSCSI layer of the ESX server, and then the IO goes to the vSAN. Now, the vSAN sitting on the ESX server sees that this VMDK, where the IO is to be written, has got two mirrors. So it clones two IOs, sends out one of the IO to one mirror, and the second IO is dispatched to the another mirror which is present on the ESX 03 server. So the IOs go to the disk group. The first thing what we do is we write the IO on the cache of both the servers, and immediately an acknowledgement is sent back to the vSAN where the IOs were originated. Once the vSAN actually gets the acknowledgement from both the SSDs, it is only then an acknowledgement is sent to the VM. So given if you have 2 mirrors, 3 mirrors, we always make sure we get acknowledgement from all the mirrors, and only then we send an acknowledgement back to the VM. And this is made to maintain the data consistency. We want all the mirrors to have the same data every time we write a data on the virtual disk. This is all about the writes. Let me also talk about something about reads. Reads, I believe you all are already aware, there are two mirrors. So vSAN actually does the load balancing when the reads come to figure out the right mirror to actually dispatch the reads and then get the response. So if there is a workload which is running, which is a very read intensive, then what we do is like we actually fetch the reads from n number of mirrors what the VM has. In this case, what you see is VM is a RAID 1 and got two mirrors. So we use both the mirrors to actually read the data and then give it back to the VM. Having multiple VM or mirrors actually definitely accelerates the read for the VMs.
Richard, we have a question. So the question is from Shrikant. He's asking if I have 3 nodes cluster, how long I can take down one of the hardware for any troubleshooting?
Okay. So by default, definitely when the vSAN, when you provision with the default policy, VMware recommends 3 nodes. So 2 of the nodes will have 2 of the mirrors, and the third node is used for placing a quorum, which actually, if there is a split brain, then actually it takes call which mirror to be accessed. So if at all you want to bring down a node, definitely you can bring down a node, but as long as the node is down, okay, there is a chance that if at all something goes bad in the surviving node, you may not be able to access the copy or the data is lost. So what we do is generally here, we recommend in case if you have lots of maintenance to have 4 node vSAN configuration, so that when a copy goes down, if you do a graceful reboot, vSAN waits for 60 minutes until the copy comes back. So generally for temporary purpose, if you are just rebooting the server for some upgrade reasons or just hardware maintenance, it won't take more than say 15 or 30 minutes to get the server up. So until then, vSAN will not do anything. It will just wait for the copy to come back. But in case if it does not come back, then it would look for the 4th node to replicate the data which is present in the surviving mirror. So to answer to your question, if you have spare node, then it would wait for 60 minutes and then it will try to replicate on the 4th server. But if you don't have the 4th node, then like you have kept a window open where like the second failure may actually result in data loss. I hope I have answered the question. So here, like, I want to also talk about something about data locality. So this question does come in many of the circle. So what happens is, like, let's say like I have a 32 node cluster. In vSAN, we also support 64 nodes in a cluster. So I'm just taking an example of 32 node cluster. And similarly to the VM on the screen, I deployed a RAID 1 VM on the cluster. So by RAID 1, it creates two mirrors. So mirrors are on node 1, ESX1, and on the ESX2. Now, for some reason, there was a lot of memory constraint on the ESX1, and VM was automatically vMotion to node number 32. Now, the data is on ESX1 and ESX2, while VM is on the host ESX32 over there. Now, in vSAN, what we do is, like, we are still fine, we can access the data. But one thing what we never do is, we don't actually copy all the data from ESX1 and ESX2 or one of the mirror and try to replicate it in the server 32. What is the reason? Technically, it looks like a basic common sense. Why not you like actually copy the data on the server 32? And it is very easy for you to access. So let's try to see the same image what we just saw from the data locality perspective for writes and reads. So, okay. So again, we are looking into the right image over here. So as I said, when an IO originates from the VM, we actually try to write all the IOs to different copies synchronously. So simultaneously, the IO is originated to server 1 and server 2. And let's say like the IO is on the, or the mirror is on the server 32. Until the IO is complete, we will always wait until we send the IO back to the VM or the acknowledgement back to the VM in case of write. Now, regardless, even if you have a fastest disk in your local server, we still wait for the IO to complete on the removed copies. So in the write case, read locality does not matter because the speed of the IO is directly equal to the slowest disk over the network. It is the same case for all the ACI solutions, no matter what they say, unless they have figured out something super computing, not supercomputing, actually they use superconductors or something, they will never be able to beat this rule that the fastest IO in a write IO on a VM is function of the slowest disk over the network. Now let's see, does the read locality helps in the read case? Okay, again, the common sense says that if the data is local, we actually get very good benefit of the reads. Is it so? Take an example of vSAN cluster, and vSAN has got a 2 TB disk. Now, let's ignore the witness component and all the stuff. Let's just look into two mirrors. The two mirrors are currently present on ESX01 and ESX02, and the disk size is 2 TB. Now, for some reason, vMotion kicked in and moved the VM to ESX2. Now, VM will still access the data over the network to one of the mirror in case of read. But in case if you start copying all the data which is present on ESX03 to ESX02, assuming that like you will get greater read performance, technically you will never get it. The reason is you have to copy entire 2 TB data from ESX03 server to 02. So the same network which was used to service all your reads and writes is now servicing entire 2 TB data outflow from the server ESX0 to ESX02. That is the first problem. You are moving a lot of data, tons of data to service the local reads. The second problem, what you would also see is, since a lot of IO is going over the network, other IOs which were actually trying to access the disks on ESX0 and ESX2 see a heavy network latency because they have got very small bandwidth to access it because there is large data outflow. The third problem is, as long as the data is not copied or complete data is not copied on ESX02, they would end up in having 4 TB of space reserved for this copy. So there is data original copy on ESX0, and if you are trying to ensure read locality, then you would also spend 2 TB of space on ESX02 to actually copy the data from ESX02 3202. So this is the third problem what you would see. And another reason why VMware never thought of doing it is, if you look technically from the latency perspective, the SSDs what you use, they have the latencies in terms of tens of milliseconds. But the network, the 10 gig what you use, the latencies of the networks are in microseconds. So the cost of accessing a data over the network is the cost of accessing the disk plus cost of accessing the network. Now disk latency you cannot ever rule out, because be it local or be it remote, you have to use that any of the disk. But the cost of accessing disk, the network data over the network is just say 0.1%. So compared, if you read locally, you may read it in 10 seconds. And if you read it remotely, you would, the latency is like 10.001. Now decide yourself, okay, is it a big latency over there to calculate? No, definitely not. And that's what our performance testings have also resulted or showed us, that like whatever we do right. We have never seen any performance hits over there because of this. So in interest of time, I want to just move over to other features also. So now we are going to talk about SVBM with vSAN, and over to Anmol.
Yeah, hi guys. So I will be talking about the SVBM with vSAN. So SVBM is called storage-based policy-based management system. It sits on the vCenter server part of the environment. So vCenter, this SVBM allows you to basically configure the high-level protection and performance for your VMs. So how it allows you to do is, you can create a vSAN policy with some specific attributes. So there's a big list of attributes that vSAN supports. So as per your requirement, you can configure the attributes. And when you apply when you provision a vSAN objects with that specific policy, you will basically you get that level of protection on through the object. As Richard has already mentioned, the object layouts will be as per that policy compliance. So if you have RAID 1 type of object, it will have that 2 copies across 2 different nodes. There are systems inside vSAN which takes a call like on which node to place that. Again, is a different math. But the overall view is, through policy, you can just tell to vSAN that I need this level of protection, I need this level of performance. So it will take care of laying out the object structure as per that. So second thing is, the workflow to create a policy is same as for other data stores, or if you're aware of vVols and other data stores. So the UI is same. So it's at same place you need to create a vSAN policy. Workflow is pretty same. So it's just like you need to tag that policy as like a vSAN type. So you will be then only you will be able to add those vSAN specific attributes to the policy. And third thing is, if you create as the policy is being created at the vCenter level, the policy created for cluster 1 can also be used to provision objects on the vSAN cluster 2, which is being managed by the vCenter server. So it is not attached to one cluster only, it's at vCenter level managed. And there's a prerequisite that important you have to understand. The vSAN policy you can only create if you have a vSAN cluster existing being managed by the vCenter server. Till you do not create any vSAN type of cluster, you may not see all the vSAN specific tagging and the policy attributes. So this was around how to create a policy. So second thing is applying a policy. So basically when we say apply a policy, what exactly it means is, we tell the vSAN, provision my object on the storage level as per the policy set. And there are, again, this has a very important prerequisite. For each and every policy attribute, there are some hardware requirements. So you should have at least that many number of resources. Whatever the policy you have set, you should have at least that many number of resources to provision object as per that policy. Otherwise, your object provisioning will fail at that point of time only. It will not allow you to provision object. I see there's some question. In case of site disaster recovery, yeah, we will cover this question. So Samir, we will answer your question when we reach the stretch cluster part. So I think it will get answered. So the good thing about vSAN policy, it's not like traditional storage where you had to handle, where the complete array was like, it was associated with just one policy. So all the VMs provisioned on that array had the same policy. Here you can have different policy for different VMs being on the vSAN, same vSAN data store, And on top of that, the beauty is you can have different VMDKs for a VM, where each VMDK can have a different vSAN policy. So with that being said, what it means is, if you have, say, for the optimal resource usage, you can plan in such a way that if you have some high critical virtual disk where you have highly critical data, you can give that more level of protection, rather than if you have some kind of some logging or some temporary something which is kind of less important, you can give them lower level of protection. Why I say that more or high level of protection, it means every time you add a level of protection, it means resource usage. So that needs to be calculated very well. That maths we should be like what we are expecting from system, that should be definitely clear to us what we are asking for. So that's one thing. Second thing is, once you create a vSAN policy, say you provision object with a vSAN policy, at any point of time you feel like now my the data is like more critical, or now before there was some more critical data, I don't need a redundant copy now, I want to decrease, I want to free up the resource. So at any point of time, you can modify the vSAN policy and basically reapply it to the object, and vSAN will, without any downtime, it will basically start configuring the object for you, and you will not observe any slowness in IOs, and it will be like VM will be still be running for you as before. So that's another advantage of SPVM. SPVM communicates a new configuration to vSAN, and vSAN knows now what to do.
So Anmol, we have a question here. So the question is from Manoj. Do we recommend RAID 6 as a best practice for vSAN?
Okay, so there is cost involved, everything. So see, the thing is, when you say RAID 6 versus, it's like RAID 6 versus RAID 1, for example. When we say that RAID 1, it means exact replica copy. That means if you had, say, 100 gig of virtual disk, your resource consumption will be of 200 gig. And if you go for with RAID 6, it needs more number of nodes to achieve that level of data protection. So with RAID 1, say for example, with RAID 1, you needed just 3 VMs in that, in 3 node cluster. And in 3 node, you consume 2x storage. But for RAID 6, you need at least 6 node cluster. Yes, the resource consumption or storage consumption there will be 1.6% rather than 1.6x rather than 2x.
So to add to what Anmol said, right? Okay, so be it a question of RAID 6, which is based on erasure coding, or be it a question of using RAID 1, they come at certain cost and benefits over there. So people who use RAID 1, 3 mirror kind of or 2 mirror kind of policies, what they see is like, okay, there is no parity calculation involved. You just have to write multiple data to multiple mirrors, and if some mirror goes down, you just have to read it from the mirror. So in terms of space consumption on a RAID 1 based type of policies, they consume a lot of space, but they give good benefits when something goes bad. Now coming back to the RAID 6, okay, that also provides you 2 fault tolerance, but the problem, it comes at different cost. Space savings, it will give you a lot. It consumes at least 50% less space that is consumed by the RAID 1 policy. But if something goes bad, let's say like one of the copy goes down, then there is definitely a performance in terms of retrieving the data by re-XORing this one, or retrieving the data from the parity bit. So this will put some amount of toll on the particular server, or a particular server where the component is located. So you need to take a call whether your data is performance intensive, or is it like you're doing very less number of IOs, and you are okay if it is bit slower in comparison. So means we definitely engineering team definitely cannot recommend what kind of performance your workload needs. You may actually you have to try it yourself and take a call on what policy suits you best. We do provide performance oriented policies as well as space oriented policies. So these are both good, but only thing, take a call based on what workload is running on your VM.
Right. And as far as I know, I think you can do erasure coding only on all flash vSAN. You can't do that on hybrid mode, right?
Yes. So erasure coding is only on all flash.
So there is a cost involved there as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, thanks, Richard. So the thing is, like once you provision that, as I mentioned, that at the object provisioning time, if you do not have enough resources, so vSAN straightforward tells you we cannot provision object with the policy. But if it has resources, so it will go through. So the point being, the point that I'm trying to explain here is, once vSAN provisions the object, it accepts the policy, it will always, your VMDK will be always, or the vSAN object will be always compliant to that policy. It can happen that in the life cycle of object for an number of reasons, that compliant vSAN object can go not compliant for some time, like some resource going bad, or till automatic healing basically does the job and gets you the newer copy of that source. Basically the component went bad. But so those are the two states, like compliant and not compliant. Not compliant means your VM is still reachable, accessible, but it's not, this do not have enough number of protection. This does not have enough protection that you had defined in the policy. So these are the two states. So Richard has already gone through like what is called object and components. So object is made up of components. So at the storage layer, so what is being actually provisioned are the components. And how we say that VM is compliant, accessible, we are able to do IOs depends on the health of these components, because they are directly related to like what is the health of a underlying infrastructure. Say for example, if disk has gone the permanent error, you might not be able to reach that component. So that status of those status of those components. So we have a designated state, different state, which tell like what is the health of component, or what is the accessibility or readability of that component on the storage layer. So we have 4 states. Say first state is active state. That means your vSAN management layer is able to read the component, do IOPS on that. Second state is absent. So initially when component vSAN management layer is not able to reach the component and not able to do the IOPS. So what it does, it marks the component as absent, assuming that it may come back if it has gone for some transient issue. There are specific something called error code. So if you see some transient error issue is there, it will mark that component as absent and will assume that it may come back after some time, and that time it will change the state from absent to active. Then third state is called degraded. What degraded means, like vSAN management has got the error code where it knows that this component will never be good, this never be bad. So it will start to be automatic healing depending on the resource availability inside a cluster. It will try to create a new copy of that component which has gone bad. Then fourth state is called active state. So say the example of RAID 1 where we had 2 replicas, and say replica 1 and replica 2. Say resource on which replica 2 resides, it has gone bad for some time, and there were continuous IOs being pushed from the GAUS level operating system layer to the virtual disk. So replica 1 will have that extra delta which was missing in replica 2 till it went bad and came back. So when the replica 2 comes back, there is a difference. There's a delta in the sequence number, or like the content of 2 copies. So vSAN takes some time to basically resync them, to bring them at the same level. Till it resyncs the data, though it happens very fast, but for that small window, it marks that those components as active state. Now, here is the thing that I think Richard has already discussed this part, explained this part. I will go through this part. So, what's the type of your cluster? How many number of nodes or hosts you have in a cluster decides what type of objects you can provision inside that cluster. Say, for example, if you want to have RAID 1 type of VM in a vSAN cluster, you need at least 3 hosts, 2 hosts to have a replica, and 1 the witness component, the code that decides the quorum. So if you see, there's a terminology called HFT. HFT is this terminology you will see in SPVM. It's called host failure to tolerate. So when you create a vSAN policy and set HFT equal to 1, what vSAN interprets it as, it's a RAID 1 type of policy. Your VM wants a protection of where it can tolerate 1 level of host failure. So this is like, and there's a formula to basically how many number of hosts are required in a cluster if you want to achieve certain level of protection for your VM. So the formula is 2n plus 1. Say with the same formula, if you want two hosts, if you want HFT equal to 2, basically up to, you want your protection level to tolerate 2 level of host failure, you need 5 nodes in a cluster. Same thing applies to RAID 3 or HFT 3. So this is one way to achieve the protection for vSAN objects. Then the other way is through erasure coding, as already discussed. So I will not take much time on this because we have lots of slides still to go. So erasure coding is the other way, where it's already defined like how many number of hosts you need to have RAID 5 type of vSAN object or RAID 6 type of vSAN object. We do recommend to have extra resource available in a cluster. What I mean is, say for example, if you have 3-node cluster and you wanted to basically provision a RAID 1 or HFT 1 type of vSAN objects, it is recommended to have one extra node in a cluster, so that for any case, if one node goes down, that vSAN automatic healing takes place and it will create another replica for that, for all the components which were on that host which has went bad. So that theory applies to all the 5 scenarios, those are on the screen. So I think this is the question this was being asked, like how many hosts and how many, this is how we should decide like how many hosts you should have in a cluster. Yeah, Richard will talk about this for data services on vSAN.
So folks, I just want to quickly run through all the data services that we have. These are very important in terms of to understand like what are the capabilities vSAN actually can give you, okay, which are on par with the centralized storage that people buy. So one of the feature what vSAN actually gives you on top of the vSAN data store is deduplication and compression. As like any standalone centralized premium solution, vSAN deduplication also works on par with it. How people use it? People use it for, in case if you have VDI workloads on your vSAN data store, or you have lots of full clone or same flavored VMs, then you get good benefit from this particular feature, because there is a lot of redundant data between those VMs. Here I want to call out that the vSAN deduplication and compression works at a disk group level. So all the data within the disk group, whichever is duplicate, is identified and then they are deduped over there. So let me also talk in terms of the internals over here. So in interest of time, I'll just run through this one so that like we get some time to talk about some other features. So over here, the vSAN deduplication works at 4K block sizes. And once we have identified a block that is to be written on the disk, after figuring out that it is a unique block, compression kicks in. It sees whether it can compress it to 2K block or no. If we cannot compress a 4K block into a 2K block, then we don't focus on compression. We just write it as it is. This is the way we actually work with deduplication and compression. This is one of the most important features of vSAN data store. For any storage product, data integrity is very important. The chances of data corruptions can take place for any number of reasons. Your firmware is bad, your disk is buggy, somewhere the mechanical head was not writing it correct. So there are n number of reasons for which data can go bad. So we have certain features which actually act as a gatekeeper for the data, where they ensure data integrity. So over here, we have a feature called software checksum. This feature, whenever a data is written on the disk, we make sure to calculate the checksum of a 4K data and then write the checksum along with the data. So whenever we read the data back, we just don't give it to the virtual machine. We first make sure that the checksum actually matches to the data that we have read. Now, in some cases where we identified corruption, what we do, we go back to a surviving mirror, see if the data is available, and then we retrieve the data from surviving mirror and give it back to the VM while we repair the data which is corrupted on the other mirror. Software checksum really ensures that there is no data corruption on the storage. So, but the thing is, the software checksum actually comes into place when you read the data. So if you keep on reading the data constantly throughout the year, software checksum is constantly like dynamically calculated, and means what we do is like we do check the software checksum over there, and then take a call whether the data is corrupted or not. But there will be some amount of data in your data center which will never be accessed for 2 years, 3 years, and suddenly when you try to access, it might be corrupted. So what we do is like we have another service which constantly runs in the behind the vSAN, which is disk rubber. So it keeps on reading all the data, whether it is read or not, throughout continuously throughout the year. And then if at all there is a data corruption because of bit rot or some other reason, we actually heal them, or like we fix the issues. So this way we make sure all the data what you have written on the vSAN is secure and there is no corruption. So data encryption is another feature that is supported on vSAN cluster. So in vSAN, we make sure the data is encrypted both on cache and on the capacity disk, because the chances of like cache being lost or cache being stolen and then data recovery are eliminated when we actually encrypt data which is also on cache. So whenever we write the data on the cache, we encrypt it and write it on the cache. And then when the data is again destaged back to the capacity disk, we again decrypt, dedupe, and then see whether the compression works. If it is compressed good, and then we encrypt and write it back. So data is very secure on an encrypted vSAN data store. Unmap and trim. I believe like all the storage administrators are aware how exactly Unmap benefits everybody. It is a feature on par with dedupe, where like it gives you the capabilities of space reclamation. All the space what VM has consumed, if at all it lets go by deleting some of the data inside the virtual machine, then you can actually reclaim all the space what guest VM let go on the vSAN data store. So we'll just look into cluster health update lifecycle. Anmol?
Yeah. Okay. So we'll try to go a bit fast from here because it's already 50 minutes. So bear with us, and please post the questions on. One of us can offline basically answer the questions on the Q&A window. Okay. So the next part we were going to talk about was the vSAN health. So it's one of the very most critical component in vSAN, which is kind of a single window where administrator can monitor the complete health of a vSAN cluster. So the health is in terms of complete physical resources, the software things, the HCL, that's called hardware compatibility list guide, and something we called vSAN build recommendations. So by hardware compatibility, what I mean is, as Richard had told in his initial slides, so we do recommend to use a vSAN recommended hardware. And the good thing is like we have basically partnered with all the all the OEM partners are working with us, and we support hardware from almost all the OEM partners. Just a second. Then similarly, we have a health test for network connectivity, where we basically report if we see that any host is not reachable or vSAN is not enabled on any of the VMK port. So basically if you see the screenshot, these are like the group of health tests. So if you expand these health tests, there are a set of health tests which tell that overall network status of a vSAN cluster. Similarly for hardware compatibility, where we talk about the HCL, then driver compatibility, then firmware compatibility. Then third is physical disk, where we tell like if any disk is under, any disk is basically not reachable, or any disk has some kind of it's under PDL. Same thing data, then object health, which we already had gone through, like healthy as per the policy. Similarly cluster level, and then there's a list of basically actually complete, we need to complete one more webinar to basically go through each and every test, but this picture should give you a fair idea like what we mean by vSAN health, and how easy it is to administrate the complete vSAN cluster from single window. It's not just the window where we report the health issues. We also provide the remedies, where there are lots of fixes that you can do from the same window. You really don't need to basically go outside this to do anything on the vSAN cluster. So this is the most critical part that we wanted to talk about. So if you remember, if you have been using vSphere for a long time, you must be aware of the upgrade path. So like any other product, the upgrade path is like the most complex part of a life cycle. till vSphere 6.0, we have been basically there was only the ESX CLI way to upgrade the ESX host. And there were lots of steps involved around that. Like it was not straightforward to upgrade a ESX. There was like, you needed to put it in maintenance mode and then basically run the ESX CLI command to basically update the software build, then exit maintenance mode. So you needed to do this rolling software upgrade across all the nodes in a cluster one by one. So this was kind of a bit tedious, but over the time we matured, and then vSphere 6.5 we got in the market. We introduced new product called vSphere Update Manager, shortly called as VUM. So in vSAN VUM, it basically takes care of all the steps, like starting from enter maintenance mode till reboot host. But we needed to explicitly mention the build, the target build for ESX, to which build we want to upgrade. Now, the more we have been seeing a lot of customer SRs in this upgrade, like after upgrade, this thing doesn't work, that thing doesn't work. So the issue, most of the times when we used to debug that issue, it was like customers never proactively used to check the target build that they had selected for upgrade. Is the target build vSAN compliant? They might be currently, their current build, their current hardware can be compliant as per the current ESX version, but they never, most of the time, they never used to check like that target where we are going, is that also vSAN compatible? They used to basically sometimes upgrade the build where they were moving from vSAN compatible hardware to vSAN non-compliant state. And that resulted in a lot of driver firmware issues. So this was the overhead when VUM introduced. Then in around 6.5 U2, we introduced a very big feature called vSAN VUM integration. So what we did there was, rather than customer itself selecting the target server build, we checked their hardware, we checked their current ESX version, and we only recommend them the latest ESX version where they can go, and their hardware will remain compliant even after the software upgrade. So it was like it was kind of a safe path, so no issue. So basically, after introducing this feature, we observed there was a lot of reduction in the SR that was receiving this upgrade path. So this feature is called vSAN VUM integration. So I will go through in detail like how it works in the back in the next slide. So when we say that vSAN compliant, what exactly it means is, it is present in the hardware compatibility list. So vSAN exposes that hardware compatibility list through some JSON, which is available for basically all the vendors to download, and you can basically read and understand where the hardware is compliant and not compliant. So what vSAN VUM feature did is, it gets the vSAN HCL from the VMware portal. Then there's something called release catalog, which is maintained on the VMware cloud side. It checks which are the latest releases from the VMware side for vSAN basically. And it used to basically mix those two and basically do some maths around it, like what are the current version, what are the current supported ESX versions for the current hardware on server, and the release as per the release catalog, which is the latest ESX version. So with that, all that combination, we used to give the ESX version, which is kind of a most latest version, and that was like safe for upgrade. So this is like how it used to work in backend. So now how to basically suggest the customer that this is a target build you can go, there is something called system baseline. So in context of VUM, there is a terminology called baseline, which is basically it's a logical entity. It is the terminology given to the ESX ISO. Basically, the baseline always consists of target software versions. If the software could be the ISO or a driver or a firmware. So from the 6.7 U1, apart from software and driver, we also started recommending the firmware upgrade also. So if you see from 6.7 U2, we have all the latest features available where you don't need to worry about your driver, firmware, software. So all things work together. So it doesn't just work in the standard ISO or stock image of a VMware. It also works well, and this workflow is absolutely same if you are using some OEM vendor specific custom ISO image. So the workflow is absolutely same. And even there are lots of customers who do not have access to the internet from their environment. Basically, their VC cannot access the internet. So when we say that it cannot access the internet, it means it cannot download the HCL database from the VMware cloud portal or release catalog. So that's called air gap scenario. Even there, we have a workflow where where the vSAN will work. It needs some extra clicks, but again, that's how their environment is. So, but the bottom line is we still provide recommendation for those kind of customers. So we'll go to the cluster topology. So till now, mostly what we have been discussing was like standard vSAN cluster. If you create go to a cluster and you don't do anything, just create vSAN cluster where all hosts were available on the same site. We used to have that's called standard cluster. Then there is a terminology that I want to introduce. It's called fault domain. So fault domain is kind of a boundary that we can make inside the same site, or you can say, if you see from the storage array angle, inside the same array, we can create a fault domain so that we can provide protection against failure as per the fault domain. So basically, say if you have 2 racks inside a lab and it's in the same site, and you want that if there's something wrong with my power failure and I don't have another site, and if something power goes wrong with my, say, rack 1, I still want my VM to be basically alive. So we create something logical partition called fault domain, and you will place different hosts in a cluster across fault domains. So when you provision a VM with the HFT1 policy, it doesn't see that one specific host. It sees like one copy should be in my fault domain 1, other copy should be in fault domain. So that logically divided areas will help you to achieve that protection against failure. So by default, when we create a standard vSAN cluster, say 3-node cluster, by default, each node represents a fault domain, a separate fault domain. But when we create this kind of fault domain, we can put 2 or 3 nodes in a one fault domain 1 and 4, 5, 6 nodes in a fault domain 2. So this has many use cases, as one I explained already, like a rack failure, and it ensures that replicas are across FDs, not both replicas are under the same fault domain. So fault domain was important to understand to digest the basically stretch cluster concept. So stretch cluster is something, I think someone had asked the question also around this. So stretch cluster means when we want to basically when we have 2 sites and we want to basically maintain replica across sites, not at the same site. Say for example, some customers have disaster recovery sites which are geographically way far, and that's actually the intention to have. Geographically far is the intention to have that to achieve that disaster recovery. If they're on the same site, then it doesn't serve the purpose. So what we do in the context of stretch cluster is we create 2 fault domains, put hosts from one site under one fault domain, and other hosts we say from secondary site from fault domain 2. So when vSAN provisions the object, it understands the type of cluster. It understands that my current cluster is stretch cluster because it has 2 sites, profiled and non-profiled. There's a way to configure this kind of cluster through the UI workflow. So now vSAN is educated like, yeah, this is my stretch cluster. And when you provision a vSAN object in this type of cluster, it will basically make sure that 2 replicas goes across sites. It doesn't sit on the same site. And the quorum, which in case of standard cluster used to sit on one of the hosts inside a cluster, we need to maintain a separate host where we have all the witness components. So I think that answers Sameer's, sorry if I say wrongly, someone had answered.
Okay, so there is a question over there. Okay, yes. So it is advisable to place the host in maintenance mode and reboot while resync is in progress. So let me answer it. So whenever you place a host in maintenance mode in vSAN cluster, you get 3 options. First is full data evacuation. Second is ensure accessibility. And the third is no data evacuation. So generally, if it is a RAID 0 VM, which is sitting on that host, then the expectation is to do a full data evacuation over there. But so assume that like there is a resync in progress where the data is being written from one side to the other, and you try to bring down a host over there, then you might create a window for the failure. So there are different cases to consider over here. So let's give you a very good scenario. So technically, when everything is good, there is no resync over there, and you want to bring down a host for maintenance mode, you can use 2 options, either full data evacuation or ensure accessibility. Full data evacuation would just flush out all the data which is present on that particular host into some other host in the vSAN cluster. This way you ensure that when this server goes down, no VM is non-compliant. Everything will be compliant when the host, the maintenance mode, host goes into the maintenance mode. The second part, if you try to ensure accessibility, then what would happen is all the images or all the mirrors on that host are compromised. Until the server comes up within the 60 seconds, all the mirrors which were present on that particular host will be shown as absent. So within 60 minutes, if some other failure happens on any of the other nodes, then there will be data loss depending on the policy that you are assigned with the VM. So I hope this answers the question over there in the scenarios. So one thing what you need to also understand is there is special meaning for maintenance mode in the vSAN cluster. So there is a case, in case site disaster tolerance.
Yeah, actually, I think I already answered this question. So Samir, do you have anything to ask on this?
So Richard, does that mean that we should avoid putting the host in maintenance mode when the resync is in progress?
So the question is like when resync is in progress, okay, are the components which are on that host which are being resynced, or it is totally an independent host where the components are being resynced? So one thing is if the host goes down, definitely the capacity of the host which was contributing to that may go down, and resync initially anticipated, okay, out of 30 TB, because of the host was present in part of the cluster, I had like 30 TB. But now this host which was contributing 5 TB goes down, then effectively, okay, the remaining capacity is 25 TB over there. So technically, like you need to take a call based on the data to be resynced.
Yeah. So just to add to that, so basically, see, resync is very generic term. What we need to understand is like what kind of resync is happening. Say, if you go to the vSAN UI at the cluster level, there is a UI, there's a small tab which you see where you can see query syncing vSAN object, basically syncing objects. So what you can see there is reconfigured resync traffic. As I told, it can be generated for n number of reasons. For example, if you had reconfigured the vSAN policy, that also means reconfiguration or resync traffic. Or say if there is another kind of, say there was a disk decommission in progress on that host, that's also kind of, that also adds to resync traffic. Or active state example I had given that. So what we need to take a call before decommissioning is like, if my decommissioning, which type of what kind of resync it is going. If it's just a policy reconfiguration, I think you can go ahead. You don't need for that resync to complete, because the host that you are going to decommission, if it is already writing something to that, and on top of that you decommission it, it will first receive the data and then again send it. First write and then read. It doesn't. We don't need to wait for that if that is a kind of resync happening. So basically, my point is you need to understand what resync is happening, and then only you can take a call. And we have streamlined that workflow. If you see the decommission screen, there are something called what if APIs we have added. So when you select the decommission mode and on the decommission screen, it tells you like what is going to be the cost of decommission, how much data, how much component, what's the size of data that will be moved as a part of that decommissioning task. So it's like information is available. We just need to take a call. What do we want? vSAN will not, from vSAN side, there is nothing, no restriction that you cannot do it. It's just like you need to take call based on like, to basically for the optimal resource utilization.
So I think if there is a whiteboard, we can explain it much better over there. Maybe we'll have a separate webinar on this maintenance mode and rebalancing traffic over there. This should like give you a very good idea of what exactly would happen if you place a host in maintenance mode.
Sure, we can do that. Yeah.
So any other questions? Probably there are a lot of topics we wanted to discuss, but I think in the interest of time, okay, it wouldn't be like possible to discuss all the stuff. I'll just close on this slide over there. So just like the way you manage vSphere using automation, vSAN also provides you a lot of interfaces to manage it. You can use automation based, Power CLI based automation to manage vSAN. And also like there are lots of APIs available both in Python and Java that actually can help you manage vSAN much better. The way you manage vSphere, I don't think so there is a challenge in managing vSphere. So there is CLI interface, there is Power CLI interface, there is SDKs, and definitely you can manage it with VCSA. So
I think that was a question from Samir.
okay, I think
yeah,
okay.
that was same.
So is there any other question, Nitin?
Yeah, so we have a question like, do we have any supported API to configure or manage vSAN? So I think we have REST-based APIs, vSAN REST APIs to manage vSAN, right?
Yes, we have Power CLI. We have n number of interfaces to manage vSAN.
That's the
Okay.
current slide actually. That's what it talks.
Yeah, right. Perfect. And then there's one more question. If one of the node failure like PSOD, what will happen to the VM and the data residing on the ESXi node? So I think the VM will get restarted on the other host using vSphere HA, but what would happen to the data?
Okay, so this all depends on, okay, the policy what you assigned with the VM. So for example, you have assigned a RAID 0 policy. Now VM is RAID 0 and its data is present on host 1, while VM is also on host 1. So if at all the host 1 goes down, then even the HA will not be able to solve the problem because it was a RAID 0, the data was present on one of the disk group and the host itself has gone down. So no matter restart, data is not available. But in case you had provisioned a RAID 1 policy, that is the default policy, then there are two mirrors. Now, the same case, mirror 1 is on the host 1 along with VM on it, and mirror 2 is on the host 2. Now the host 1 goes down. Then HA will definitely restart the VM on surviving host because there is another mirror or the replica of that particular VM on host 2.
Right. But what would happen to the data? Will it still be there or it will get resync later on after 60 minutes?
Okay. So in case of PSOD, which is like an abnormal case, so what would happen is like the VC or the vSAN would identify that the host has permanently gone off. So what it would do, it would actually immediately start resyncing the data on the other host so that the second mirror comes up immediately.
Perfect. Got it.
So so we wanted to discuss on certain topics, maybe in the subsequent seminars. So some of the topics of interest, what we had was one is self-healing. So it had all the contents like what we discussed just now. What happens when the host is PSODed? What happens when we do a reboot? What happens if a disk goes bad, disk group goes bad, or let's say like some part of the disk is bad? How exactly vSAN self-heals itself? So that was one of the topic. The second topic what we have for the future seminars is data rebalancing. What happens if one host is 100% full? Or what would happen if I add a new node? Or what would I do if I decommission a disk group? How it does the rebalancing of the traffic? So that was the second part. The third topic what we have is on vSAN upgrade, how customers can do vSAN upgrade smoothly. And third was on the different clusters or the cluster topology, the stretch cluster. So there is a lot of stuff on in stretch cluster than what it meets the IO here. So you can do a lot of tons of stuff. You need to know a lot of stuff that would really help you to better manage stretch cluster. So these are a couple of topics what we have. Maybe like we'll share it with Nitin and maybe we can have a survey who is interested in which topic and we can focus on that. So
sure, Richard,
how much time do we have, Nitin? So we can take more questions.
I think we are already running out of time, so we can take last two questions. So if you see the Q&A window, there's a question. So Vamshi Krishna is explaining a scenario that I've done the upgrade on one host. It took me more than 1 hour and the resync started. Should I need to wait until the resync is complete and start another node upgrade?
Definitely, we would recommend to wait until the resync
is complete.
So the reason is like resync is done for a certain reason. The resync is done so that like the object needs to be compliant. That's why we copy the data or move the data. Now in between, if we bring down another node, then we are actually injecting the second fault. So it's always advised for the resync to be completed. Now one question comes up. Who triggered the resync? What is the cause for the resync? So we need to understand that too. Did you change the policy, or like is it because the data evacuation the resync is triggered? Various factors come in.
Right. Okay. So the last question is, I'm not sure if the question is relevant from data store, but is it possible to make child disk from the parent VMDK without any interruption to the running VM?
No, always like this is like doing a link clone over there, and always we would recommend, or it's general practice, or like it's the way of doing the link clones over there, that the parent disk should be shut down. There should not be any active IOs happening to the parent disk while you create a snapshot or a child disk. So the answer is the VM should be powered off.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so since we have already ran out of time, so I think we should close it here, and maybe we can have a subsequent session on vSAN to cover the rest of the topics that Richard has highlighted.
So Nitin, maybe you can collect all the questions what every panelist has, and then what we can answer it over the mail.
That can also be done. Yeah, I'll try and do that. So thank you everyone. Thank you everyone for joining the session. Thank you, Richard and Anmol, for presenting a wonderful session on vSAN. Hopefully, we'll try and have a subsequent webinar on this so that we can cover the rest of the topics. So thanks again. Sid, do you have anything that you want to share?
No, I think you have covered most of the things. So thanks, Richard and Anmol. The session was really good. So we had a couple of questions, and it means that people are really interested in this topic. So probably we'll collect the feedback, and we may want to come back to you for the subsequent session. So let's hear it back then.
Sure. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
And for everyone else, do get in touch with your TAMs, respective TAMs, to get the recordings. Thank you. I'll end this session now.